fasting after Tishrei is over, and the same thing after Nisan. After Nisan is over for Pesach, so the first time there's a Monday, Thursday, Monday, there's a custom to fast. So in most places they don't do anything, but some places they do the slichot without doing the fast days, and but that shouldn't affect Tachnun. To that, wow, you should take that seriously.
They're waiting after it's like nothing.
I don't know when they. Maybe there was a chatan, or maybe there's a chatan. I don't know why else.
This is one of those obscure, like once in a while.
Right? No. Bet Heybet is obscure enough, but I don't know of any other reason why we shouldn't say Tachnun today. What is today? Chet Cheshvan, no? Chet Cheshvan.
I think so. The celebration yesterday.
You were to Rachel Imenu yesterday, and
maybe there's a brit milah later after the.
right? It could be there's a brit later this morning. Okay, pass me a book, please. Thank you. Okay, so I apologize for the delay. There was a lot of traffic. A lot of traffic getting into the city. We have trouble at our Machon, our local Machon. So I went the other way. I went all the way around, and it's faster. But I went through Efrat, through the Minarot. Yeah, I usually come straight through Har Choma, but I got word that there's a big pkak there, so I tried to go around. I did, so I saved a few minutes. But here we are. Anyways, Baruch Hashem, we're learning laws of Shabbat, so it's a good thing you're here, Gershon. It's always good to...
I'm also here for your Buddhist thing.
Perfect. 12:30, great. 12 after 12, we're going to the kever. A former student of ours passed away. Okay, so let's get our test going. Let's get our test going. Oh, that's on the board. Okay. Okay, Idan, what's the Hebrew words for dawn? The earliest time, the earliest a glimmer of light. Alot HaShachar. Good. Yosef, what's the Hebrew word for sunrise?
Sunrise is Zerika.
Zericha. One correct answer. There's another answer?
Zerika, Netz, Hachasha.
Hachama. That's Hachama. Very good. Excellent.
Okay. I didn't open the book.
Oh, it's not in the book. We did it on the board.
I don't open the phone either.
That's all right. Tell me. Let's see what kind of excuse he's going to come up with here. You see this? It never dies. Yeah, the excuses. He's going to say there's a war or something silly like that.
I don't remember the name, but I remember the positions there.
Okay, good. Okay.
It's just to answer you in interpretive dance.
No problem. Sounds good. Okay. But tell me, what is a sunset? Sunset. The Hebrew word for sunset. You don't remember it? It's hard to remember.
I remember the positions.
Okay.
It's
Tell,
like
what?
this, and then I put under.
Yeah. Tell me, when do we light the candles on Erev Shabbat? When do we light the candles? Do you after? When do we light the candles on Shabbat? Friday night candles. When do we light them? What's the timing for that?
6:30.
6:30? Well, it depends, right?
It depends.
Yeah, right. Okay. So it's relative to what point? So what's the fixed point that we adjust it to?
The position of the sun.
Position of the sun down. Exactly. That's right. And in Jerusalem we light the candles. 40 minutes before sundown. Exactly. That's Zman Hadlakat Nerot. In Tel Aviv, it's 18 or 20 minutes before sundown. Good. Sundown is called Shkiat HaChama. Shkiat HaChama. Right, so we have Neitz HaChama in the morning, and the full word of sunset is Shkiat HaChama. Chama is the sun.
I have the wall. I haven't the wall. So I don't memorize, but I
Yeah. Sure, you can look. Yeah, you have one right here if you want.
I haven't.
You have two at home. Okay, good. Very nice. Gershon, do you want one of these calendars at Machon Meir? You can even get a nice picture. You pass this out, give this to Gershon. Free of charge. And it gives you the... Yeah. Tell me what's the Zman Adlakat Nerot this week, this Friday. Could you find it on the... If today's Chet Cheshvan... Shesh v'shtayim dakot. So when is Hadlakat Nerot on Friday?
For Friday, 5:58.
No, it can't be. That's the Shkia, but when's Hadlakat Nerot? It's in the big letters at the bottom. For Yerushalayim. Go 5:58 minus 40. You can tell me already. It's 5:12. Yeah.
It's 5:19.
5:19. I apologize. 5:19. Right. That's 40 minutes before. It is confusing. Yeah, it is confusing. All right, it's getting earlier. Now, watch this party trick. What time is going to be Zman Adlakat Nerot next week? Anyone before? Don't say. Tell me, what time is it going to be next week? 5:17. You think, it changes a few minutes. Yeah?
This was 45. 5:45.
We're changing the clock. Let's say Shabbat, we're changing the clock. So next week it's going to be 4:15, not 5:15. 4:12 even. Next week. Not this coming week. This coming week will be normal.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock is the sundown, but we light the candles 40 minutes before that.
Okay, you're talking about.
So lighting the candles 40 minutes before that. Next week it's going to be a whole hour earlier because we have daylight savings time, which is over. In the summertime, we do in wintertime, we go back, and now it's going to be really early. Shabbat's going to start after 4.
After 4?
Yeah. Not this week, next week. It's tough, huh? It's tough. The short days, it makes the Fridays even more difficult. Which brings us back to Shabbat. Okay, the last, Stephen, what do you say is the Hebrew word for when the stars come out? Excellent. Okay, so good. You guys remember. I don't think there was anything else we skipped. Let's go. So we're preparing for Shabbat. We don't do Melacha on Shabbat. We prepare. And we're up to chapter 3. We did chapter 3 pretty much Baal Peh. Those are the major things. Now, one more thing I want to say. We talked about when we start Shabbat. And Tosefet Shabbat, the time of adding on to the Shabbat, that we should at least 1 minute before sundown add, ideally 18 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 minutes before sunset, that we should add on to the Shabbat. And that's a mitzvah. When does Shabbat end? Once we're talking about the timing, Havdalah. When do we say Havdalah?
3/4 of a meal, but
so as we saw yesterday, that we don't say that Shabbat is over for sure when the sun goes down, right? The simple understanding, day is from sunrise to sunset. But no, after sunset, we're not sure that it's dark yet. So we have to wait. How long do we have to wait until the stars come out? So here there's a few opinions. Standard opinion, which was in Europe 100 years ago, was 13 and a half minutes. But in these parts, it's more like a half an hour. And for Shabbat, we're machmir. Shabbat, you'll notice that there's different times. For example, when there's a fast day, we had fast days, 4 fast days a year, right? Rabbinic fast days for the commemoration. we wait until the stars come out. We don't finish at sundown. We wait until the stars come out. But how long do we wait until the stars come out? You can realize that it's variable. How many stars? How easy is it to see them? There's a lot of calculations. In any case, for Shabbat, we're machmir more than any other time. And you know how long we wait? Usually it's 35 minutes is the standard. Wait 35 minutes after sundown. So sundown's around 6 o'clock. Shabbat is not going to be over till 6:35. It was 6:02, so Shabbat was out 6:37. But it varies a little bit by your geographical location, but that's the standard approach, is that we're machmir. Now there's one other opinion about the stars coming out. That's right, the famous Rabbi Natan's opinion, and he says you have to wait even longer, until all the stars come out. All the stars? It's about 72 minutes, not 35, but 72 minutes. So it adds an extra 35 minutes, pretty much 37 minutes more until Shabbat is really out and you can do malacha. I have a son who keeps Rabbeinu Tam. He keeps bugging me. You should do it. It's really worthwhile. You should extend the Shabbat. I mean, he's one to talk. He extends the Shabbat all the way till midnight. He goes on and on until 2 in the morning. He just doesn't want to leave Shabbat. He loves it so much. But there is a chumrah. There is a stringency. Many people keep.
New York.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of Hasidim keep Rabbeinu Tam. That means that they extend the Shabbat.
We were doing Siddur Shlishi and Mincha, but everyone else was making Havdalah.
I see. Yeah.
Like you see in the streets that people were already engaging in life, and we were just
Right.
Mincha.
Right. Rabbeinu Tam in general, it's not only about when the stars come out. He has a whole different calculation about how to figure out the twilight and when it's sundown, and it's a little bit complicated based on the passages in the Talmud. And there was a time period in Jewish history, still about a couple hundred years ago, where the majority of the Jewish world followed Rabbeinu Tam's opinion. Not only on taking out Shabbat, but also on bringing in Shabbat. They were not so careful about sundown, shkia, like I was trying to drill it into your head. Once upon a time, the Jewish calendar worked a little differently. And most communities followed Rabbeinu Tam's practice, which gives you more time at the beginning and more time at the end. So basically, he pushes off the actual changing from daylight to nighttime for a longer duration of twilight, without getting into the details right now. Okay, so that's the basic things. We light the Shabbat candles. You must light the Shabbat candles. Turn to chapter 4, please. We're going to get started on chapter 4. Yes?
During summer, let's say we accept the Shabbat earlier. So we go back home.
Yeah.
We light the Shabbat candle. Then after we wait for a while, then we say Shema.
Yeah, I mean, ideally you should say Kiddush after sunset, at least. If better after Tzeitzei Kochavim by the time you get home from shul and everything. It usually works out. But you can say Kiddush earlier. There is an allowance. Some people do it. They're talking about precedent in Jewish history. There's the first teshuvah, the first question and answer in a book called Trumat Hadeshen, who lived in the, I'd say, 15th century, something like that. It's not the Ramah. Trumat Hadeshen is the Maharil. Mari Isserline. It's not the Ramah. He writes that the custom was in their parts that I think in Germany, that because summertime, it gets dark maybe 9 o'clock, very late. Sweden, there's nothing to talk about. Never gets dark. But in those parts, so they said, and the first question in the book is, how can we justify the custom of the communities halachically? Because we have to go by this sun setting, and Shabbat has to enter, and we have to read the Shema after dark. It's not dark yet. And he said their custom was this is the Jewish communities. They brought in Shabbat early on Friday, whenever it was convenient for them, 6 p.m., let's say. And they went to shul, come back from shul, and they had dinner, Shabbat meal. Of course, they made kiddush, had a Shabbat meal. And then the custom was everybody went out for a walk along the banks of the river. I think it was the Rhine River. And it was still broad daylight. Can you imagine how early they accepted the Shabbat? And then they went home and went to sleep. And what about Shema? What about Kiddush? What about the dark? This is the first question. And he tries very hard to justify it. It's very hard to justify it. But there's big Jewish communities with big rabbis that all do following this custom. So there must be some reason. He comes up with some Talmudic analysis that there's an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says that since even earlier in the day, even before sundown, if it's to the last section of the sun, that before it goes down, it's called Plaga Mincha. From then on, you can actually receive the Shabbat early. Some people do that, not that early, and nobody does that anymore. But this was their custom. Anyways, he discusses the matter in terms of the sources, halachically. And there is such a custom to welcome the Shabbat early, not only a few minutes, like we were saying, 20 minutes or 40 minutes, and you sing the Kabbalat Shabbat and you pray, that's fine. But by the time you get home, it's already dark, and then it's Shabbat, you can say Kiddush after dark, there's no problem. Some people even do it earlier. There are some rules, but many people want to do it the Shabbat early because they have little kids, and they're going to be asleep if you don't. They'll never have a Shabbat meal the whole summertime. If they go to sleep at 6, and Shabbat only comes in at 7, so the kids will all be asleep. So one can hope, right? But there is such a custom. Some people don't like it because you're not saying Shema at the right time. Some rabbis don't like it. I'm saying, and some people don't like it. It seems you're saying it's Shabbat, but it's broad daylight. It's not dark yet. But there is such a custom, and you have to be careful to say the Shema after dark. That's what the common custom is now. Those communities who do bring in Shabbat very early, they can't bring it in too early. It has to be after this Plaga Mincha, the sort of half Mincha time, which we're not going to get into now exactly when it is, but the rabbi of the community will guide you exactly how early you can bring in Shabbat. And then you have your regular Shabbat, and you just have to make sure to say Shema later. Again, after you've said it during Mariv, but it was too early to actually absolve yourself of the obligation. So,
but is a bedtime Shema insufficient? No.
Yeah, so this is what Rashi says, right? At the beginning of Masechet Brachot, he talks about it. And it was not only, I brought you the extreme example of the Trumat Hadeshen, but Rashi already in the first page of Talmud discusses this question. But when is nighttime? When it comes to Shema. And he says, what we do in France, apparently this was the custom, that all the shuls davened Mariv early. They would daven Mincha, sundown, and then right away daven Mariv. In some shuls today, they still do that. They daven Mariv early. He said, but what about Shema? We have to read the Shema after Tzeit HaKochavim, after stars go out. And we don't. So Rashi says we rely on bedtime Shema. Everybody's going to be saying the Shema again before they go to sleep. And that'll be after dark for sure. So we rely on the bedtime Shema. Now you have to be careful. If you're doing that, you should say the full Shema in the bedtime Shema. In some Sidurim, all it has for the bedtime Shema is only one of the 3 passages of Shema. And so if you're going to rely on that, say the bedtime Shema with the full 3 passages, and then you've covered your bases. Okay? So the brachot, according to this system, Rashi doesn't seem to think it's horrible. I mean, this is the custom of the communities. So we separate them from the real Shema. Right? The Shema that you're fulfilling your obligation is going to be at the bedtime Shema. But the blessings before and after the Shema, which we say during Mariv, that's a separate takana, institution of the sages, that you must say the order of prayers with these blessings. And apparently they're good enough. You can say those early. It's only the Shema itself that we care about saying after dark. So we separate between the blessings and the Shema. We say the Shema earlier too. We say the blessings around the Shema, but it's a Shema which we're not really fulfilling our obligation with. Yes.
Amen.
Amen. I go to the synagogue but before light, I used to light before I go
Yes.
to the synagogue.
Yes. Yes.
Until one day, we start to burn it.
Oh no.
So now I don't do.
Oh.
Because I come back, it's about 10, 11 o'clock.
Right.
I can't light before, I can't light after.
Right. I hear you. Best what you should do is ask somebody, maybe Yechiel, I'll speak to him, to arrange in your home an area which is safe. An area which is safe for you to light candles. And you should light candles so that ideally they'll still be lit when you come home at night, so you can have some benefit from the candles when you get home. So maybe you use longer candles to make sure that if you know that you stay out very late. But you should be lighting candles in a safe way, 100%. If you're not sure, there's a chance of a fire, you have to be careful. But in most homes, there is a way of making an area with no flammable materials nearby, maybe on the kitchen counter. The counter is not flammable. It has usually it's some kind of a stone. So you should try to figure it out. There's a place where you can light candles because it's a mitzvah.
I know. So,
but you have to be safe. Good. It's good you're being careful. It's good you're being careful. A lot of people use foil underneath the tray, or they have a special tray with foil. But it's better safe than sorry. Make sure that you get somebody consulting. If you had a fire once, is that what happened?
Yes.
Terrible. So dangerous.
Once I made on the stairs.
Ah.
And the neighbor say, "What are you doing?"
I see. No, it should be in your home, but it has to be safe. So I'm going to ask Yechiel to look in on you and create a safe space for you to light candles. You're right. You can light later when it's after dark, but you really should light earlier. Now the tricky thing is, there's one more thing about Shabbat times. I know I want to move on to chapter 4, but there's one more thing which we have to figure out, and that is, it's particularly important when the Binyamin's case, when a man is lighting the candles. Because it does happen, but it's a little different from when a woman lights candles. Why should it be any different? The tricky part is davening mincha. Most Jews daven mincha together with a minyan in shul. Mincha is the last prayer of the weekdays. Before they start Kabbalat Shabbat, accepting upon themselves the Shabbat. Now, ideally, the community should be singing Kabbalat Shabbat, accepting upon themselves Shabbat, at least 1 minute before sunset. To do Tosefet Shabbat, to have an additional time to not only start Shabbat at the last possible second, which is sundown, but also a minute before. Okay, so most shuls do that. But right before that, you need to gather, so you have 10 people. So you have mincha. So you have mincha right usually just before sunset. Okay, great. But what do you do before sunset? You light the candles. How do you do? Light candles or daven mincha? Can you do both at the same time? So if you have a wife or a mother who's lighting candles, so she's at home. She doesn't come to mincha usually. there's no obligation of tefillah b'tzibur for women. Even if they want to go to shul, they don't have to be there for mincha. They can come there for the singing, for the lachadodi, for Kabbalat Shabbat a little later. But whatever it is, the woman has her mitzvah of lighting the candles. She can light 20 minutes before sunset or 40 minutes before sunset, while the husband goes to mincha. So we have, it's not nice, it's a division. For the woman who lights candles, when you light candles, you accept Shabbat. They're Shabbat candles. She says, Asher kicha bracha, Asher kichanu mitzvah v'tzivanu, ladlik ner shel Shabbat. So she's calling it Shabbat. She's doing a mitzvah for Shabbat. She's not even supposed to blow out the match, because after she says the bracha, it's already Shabbat for her. So for her, it's Shabbat. But the man usually doesn't accept Shabbat at candle lighting, because he's still going to go to daven mincha. Mincha belongs to the weekday. He accepts Shabbat with the community when they start Kabbalat Shabbat. Either with Lachadodi or Mizmor Shir, or some communities, they make an announcement. This community, my community, they make an announcement. Even before we start Kabbalat Shabbat, they say, the community of Sukkot David, that's the name of our shul, accepts upon itself Shabbat Kodesh. And the idea is we should do that at least a minute before sundown. And then you can sing as long as you want, but sometimes communities sing, and the chazan takes a while, and before you know it, it's after sundown. You haven't yet said, the Chadodi, or you have not accepted upon yourself the Shabbat. At the beginning of the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat, it doesn't really say that you're accepting Shabbat. Only later on, when you say Mizmor Shir L'Yom Shabbat, then you accept Shabbat. But by the time you get to Mizmor Shir L'Yom Shabbat, it's already after sundown. So that's why some communities make an announcement beforehand. Some communities just start earlier. But the idea is, though, that there's a bifurcation. There's a separation between the wife who light candles. For her, it's Shabbat. And the husband, for him, he doesn't accept the Shabbat until a minute before sundown, because he's still got to daven mincha. He's got to daven mincha, and then he accepts Shabbat with the Kabbalat Shabbat. So what happens, though, when you don't have a wife or a mother? You're lighting the candles yourself. It's a mitzvah to light Shabbat candles. You should have light in your home. What about mincha? You're a man. You want to go daven mincha with the community. So what do? So the men usually, they make a condition. They say, when I light the candles, even though I'm lighting the candles now, because I won't be able to later, I'm not going to accept the Shabbat. There's such a concept. You can light Shabbat, but if you explicitly say, I'm going to light the candles and not accept the Shabbat yet, then that allows you to still daven mincha. Good morning. Boker tov. B'kasha. Gustavo, welcome. Hi there. Shalom.
אז קצת חשבתי שיכול לבוא, ומחכה למטוס כדי לחזור בזה.
טוב, בסדר גמור. בוקר טוב, Rav Listman. Everybody say Boker Tov to Rav Listman.
What a soldier. This is your soldier.
You know what we figured out yesterday? What year are we in now? Tafshin Pei Daled. 5784. Do you know what that means? Binyamin is 84 years old. He was born year Tafshin 5700. Amazing.
Many happy, healthy years.
That's it. Saz Hashem. Good. Okay. Good morning. So we're learning a little bit about the laws of Shabbat and the timing. So if you light your own candles, you light the candles, but you don't accept the Shabbat, and then you can go and pray mincha. Now, sometimes it gets a little even more confusing, because let's say even if you do have a wife who's lighting the Shabbat candles for you, you realize, and you're going to mincha, okay, so you didn't accept the Shabbat yet. But then you look and you say, oh, I'm late. Does that ever happen to you? That you're late getting to shul on Friday afternoon? Happens to me a lot, right? Because there's a few last things to do. You're trying to wash up, you're trying to finish, whatever it is, and you realize you're late. Uh-oh. But you look and you see that you look on your watch and you see, uh-oh, sundown is coming. Sundown is coming. Well, what do you have to do before sundown? You have to accept Shabbat. But you still have mincha to pray. Now you've got a quandary. If I accept the Shabbat, I'll do a big mitzvah because I'm accepting the Shabbat at least 1 minute before sundown. That's the mitzvah, to add on to the Shabbat. But on the other hand, once I accept Shabbat, can I pray mincha, which belongs to the weekdays? I won't be able to pray mincha. And if I pray mincha, and then it'll be already after sundown when I accept Shabbat, I won't have fulfilled the mitzvah of Tosefet Shabbat. It's a common problem for people who are late. So Rav Melamed suggests, following Rav Ovadia Yosef's innovation, he says, you know what you do in such a case? Accept the Shabbat only in your mind, without saying it explicitly. And that way you're still able to pray the mincha service after accepting Shabbat. Very interesting, sort of having your cake and eating it too. So you'll fulfill the mitzvah of accepting Shabbat in your mind, but that still allows you to pray the mincha, which belongs to the weekdays. Other poskim, they choose. They say, no, better accept the Shabbat early and don't daven mincha. Other people say, no, you daven mincha and you missed out on Tosefet Shabbat. What can you do? Obviously, you're not going to do malacha once the sun comes down. You won't do any violation of Shabbat. But in terms of prayers, you keep praying. You got to pray your Friday afternoon mincha, and then you'll accept the Shabbat. Afterwards you'll say Kabbalat Shabbat. But the Rav Ovadia's got this sort of trick that sometimes I make use of. If I'm walking to shul and I see, oh, I'm so late. Sometimes I do something else, which again, I should turn off the camera because I'm admitting to my my sins here in public. I'm really ashamed of it, but sometimes it happens. What I do is that I realize, from my house to shul, it's about a 7-minute walk. What if it's 7 minutes before sunset? That 7 minutes of a walk is going to take up all my time that I have to daven mincha and to accept the Shabbat before sundown, to fulfill the mitzvah of Tosefet Shabbat. So sometimes what I do, maybe I really shouldn't do this, but sometimes I daven mincha at home. I realize, okay, I've got 8 minutes till sundown. I daven mincha without a minyan. That's why I'm guilty. That's because really I should be davening with the community. But sometimes I daven at home, mincha. Then I look at the clock, I see, okay, is there anything left that I have to do? Lights have to turn on or off before sunset? And then I say, okay, I accept upon myself the holiness of Shabbat. Usually I say, Mizmor Shir L'Yom Shabbat. We learned it last week. I think it's Tehillim 92, if I'm not mistaken, right? Mizmor Shir L'Yom Shabbat. And I recite that and accept upon myself the Shabbat a minute before sundown. And then I walk to shul, and I join the community saying the Kabbalat Shabbat as much as I can, but essentially that way I get my mincha and I get my Tosefet Shabbat. Sometimes already on the way to shul, I accept the Shabbat early in my mind, and then I daven mincha with the community so I don't mess up. Question? Yeah.
Why not Rav Mincha Gedolah?
You could. Yeah, if you were smart enough, you daven mincha early. Yeah, there's two. There's basically, you're allowed to daven mincha the entire afternoon. Anytime from midday plus a half an hour. But midday nowadays is around 12:30. So from around 12:50, 12:20, so around 12:50, from then on you're allowed to daven mincha. Earlier in the afternoon it's called mincha gedolah. Later in the afternoon it's called mincha ktana. We won't get into it now. But either one is kosher. And if you are wise, I think a lot of communities have 2 minyanim for mincha on Shabbat afternoon, on Friday afternoon, because they know it's going to be rush later. So that people daven mincha earlier, and then you don't have any rush. You just make sure you accept the Shabbat at least a minute or 18 minutes before, or 40 minutes before sundown.
Alright.
Yeah.
What if let's say I'm late, then I daven I accept a couple of Shabbat, then I finish Ma'ariv, then I do another what is Amidah, yeah.
You only can do that if you make a mistake. You don't never do that on purpose. There is such a thing of making up prayers that you've missed. But there's laws about how it works, and we don't do that on purpose ever. If
no, I mean, it's really late, really. Like, you have no choice.
If you have no choice,
Yeah.
if you missed mincha, then you have no choice. But the truth is, as I said earlier, because there's a few opinions, this Rabbeinu Tam, remember we mentioned him at the beginning of class, that his system of when the transition between day and night happens is very different. If you're late for mincha and sundown has already happened, you can still daven mincha. You can rely on Rabbeinu Tam's opinion and daven mincha even after sunset. And that's better than totally missing mincha. Totally missing mincha. Some rabbis are very strict and they say, once sundown, you can't daven mincha. But that's not the common. The standard psak, Mishnah Berurah says, that you can still daven mincha after shkia, after sunset. And that's best, because you don't want to skip a prayer. You don't want to miss out the prayer. Making up a prayer is only if you're half an hour after sundown, then maybe you have no choice. Those who follow Rabbeinu Tam say you've got 72 minutes after sundown. It's still not Tzeta Kochavim. It's still the twilight. So you can, or at least 60 minutes. But pretty much for half an hour after Shkia, you can still daven mincha if you have to, and that's best. And then you haven't skipped anything, and then you don't have to get into making up prayers. It's more complicated, especially on Friday afternoon. So let's say you did, you forgot mincha, you skipped it, you thought you davened earlier and you didn't, for whatever reason, now it's dark. Now it's for sure, it's Shabbat. So there is a concept of making up prayers. But what prayer are you going to make up? It's Shabbat now. So you're going to say a Shabbat prayer twice to make up for the mincha that you lost. Mincha was a weekday mincha. And you're making this, you can, it works, but it's a little bit odd. So it's not ideal. It's not ideal. This idea of making up prayers is only after the fact. If it's been done, we never plan on doing it that way. Okay?
Relevant to travel, what does one do, such as myself, who is traveling outside the house? I have a wife, so technically I'm Yotze by her, but do I light candles this coming Shabbat or no?
So if your wife lights candles, even if you're in a different country, she lights on your behalf as well. So you don't have to light candles. When I was a single guy in yeshiva in Israel, I didn't light candles. My mother in Toronto was lighting candles. Now it doesn't matter that it's 7 hours back. It's 2 a.m. before she's lighting the Shabbat candles on my behalf. It doesn't matter. She lights on your behalf. That's the common custom, is that we the women, we fulfill our obligation with the women in our lives. It's only when there is no woman in your life whatsoever, then who's lighting candles, then you do it yourself. But that's the common custom. So as long as you're still married, B'ezrat Hashem, for many years in good health and happiness, she lights the candles for you. Pretty sure that's okay. All right. So we learned about Mincha Friday night. We learned about Motzei Shabbat, and now we'll talk about the mitzvah of lighting Shabbat candles. More details about it. Chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4. Let's read it from the top. Stephen, why don't you start? Page 57. That's chapter 4, section 1. Go ahead.
Lighting Shabbat candle. the mitzvah of lighting Shabbat candle. There is a rabbinic mitzvah to light a candle to honor Shabbat. There are three reasons for this. To honor Shabbat as a banquet without light is of no significance. Second, for Oneg Shabbat, because one who cannot see his food does not enjoy it. 3. To bring Shalom Bayit, peace in the home, because one who cannot see his furniture and belongings trip over them and get angry and irritable. It is so important to have light at the Shabbat table that the standard state that one who does not have enough money to buy a candle should go door to door begging for charity in order to buy it. Shulchan Aruch 263.
Okay, so it's a big mitzvah to light Shabbat candles even if you have very little money. Nowadays, I don't know if you've seen this around the town. Lighting Shabbat candles is such a marker of Jewish identity that one of the mivtzoim of the Rabbi of blessed memory, everybody knows that his Hasidim stand on the street corners and trying to get people to put on tefillin. Also, they stand on street corners and they give out candles, tell you to light Shabbat candles, every woman. And the Rebbe was so excited about lighting Shabbat candles as a statement of identity that he, going out on a limb, halachically, as we're going to see, he said that even young single women, daughters, should also light candles. Even though their mother is lighting candles, they should, each girl should light candles. From the age of bat mitzvah, maybe even earlier. I can't remember what the Chabad custom is. In any case, lighting Shabbat candles is even more important than it was in the olden times. In the olden times, they didn't have electricity, so to light candles was utilitarian, to make sure that you had light in the house, so you had a nice atmosphere. Nowadays, it's more of a significant marker, and it's a spiritual moment. We don't usually use live candles. We have all this electric lights and neon and fluorescent and all sorts of stuff, but something really warm and special about lighting a real flame with match. So it's a big mitzvah, maybe more important than ever. We're going to skip because we need to. We have a very limited time to learn about the laws of Shabbat, so we can't go into all the details. Of course, you can read chapter 4 yourself, and we talked a little bit about specific examples already. So we're going to not go into all the details of lighting Shabbat candles. And again, if you have questions, you can ask, you can learn, you could study. But we're going to move ahead to chapter 5. Apologize, but we're trying to rush through and cover the most important halachot. Although it's hard to say what's important, what's not. Chapter 5, Rav Melamed speaks about the studying Torah and prayers on Shabbat. Here he goes out on a limb. He's got a very unique system where he tries to calculate how many hours of Torah study must you do on Shabbat. Because he says at the beginning of chapter 5, page 71. Gershon, you want to read for us?
Okay. Studying Torah on Shabbat. It is a mitzvah to study a great deal of Torah on Shabbat. The sages stated Shabbat and Yom Tov were given solely to study Torah on them. Shabbat Yerushalmi, 15c is the page. The sages also stated, the Torah said to God, Master of the universe, when the Jews enter the land, this one will run to his vineyard, and that one to his field. What will become of me? God responded, I have a partner with whom I will pair you. Its name is Shabbat, on which they do not work, and thus can engross themselves in you. This is a quote from the Torah.
Right, so we see that the Torah, Shabbat is a time for Torah. Turn the page 72. The sages tell us, go ahead.
The sages tell us that we must divide?
Yep.
Okay, the sages tell us that we must divide our time on Shabbat Half of it should be spent studying Torah in the Beit Midrash, and half should be spent enjoying Shabbat through food, drink, and sleep. This is sourced from Pesachim 68b. Some maintain that it is only on Yom Tov that the division is meant to be even, but that on Shabbat, which is designated for Torah study, one must dedicate more than half of one's time to Torah study. This is the Bach, based on an opinion of the Rambam. However, most poskim maintain that on Shabbat too, one should divide the time evenly, with half of one's time spent on Torah and half spent on physical pleasures. It would seem then that the obligation is to dedicate about 12 and a half hours to Torah study, since Shabbat with its Tosefet lasts approximately 25 hours. However, in practice, it would seem that we can be lenient and leave out of the calculation the 7 hours one needs to sleep each night. There are then 18 hours remaining. These, one should dedicate 9 hours to Torah and 9 hours to studying Shabbat with food, drink, and pleasure exercise. Although Torah study is the primary spiritual component of Shabbat, according to a number of poskim, one may be lenient and include in these 9 hours of Torah time spent in prayer on condition that the prayer service is not too drawn out. We then see that in practice one must dedicate at least 6 hours to Torah study every Shabbat. Adding this to 3 hours of prayer, we reach a total of 9 hours.
Okay, so as I said, this is a calculation which I've never seen anywhere else, except for this book by Rabbi Melamed. It's quite a unique system, but it's beautiful. He has a community called Har Bracha, where the day is jam-packed with Torah study. For the children, for the wives, for the adults, for this type of learning, that type of learning, and they don't waste any time. No hanging out, going to the ball games, no sitting around while reading newspapers. Shabbat is a day for Torah study. It's a beautiful thing. He says, we work all day, all week long. When are we going to study Torah? We have to study Torah on Shabbat. And it really is a game changer. It really changes the nature of the day. It goes into what to study, how much to sleep. He has a very significant public shiur for the entire community. And the shul is packed. Hundreds of people come every Shabbat to hear the rabbi's sermon. This is an ancient custom, goes back to the period of Chazal, 2,000 years old. This was the central Torah study of the week. Everybody would come, because they didn't have books. Then they didn't read from books. The Torah was different. They came to hear the rabbi's sermon. And Rav Melamed has one like that for women. The same shul is filled with hundreds of women at a specific designated time. And they have it like at 12:30 in the afternoon. So like everybody has to finish their lunches on time so that everybody can come to the shiur. It's quite an impressive system. He talks here about women and Torah study. But we're going to skip to where he talks about the Torah reading. Page 80. Of course, I'm not going to argue with Rav Melamed, but I will say that it's a unique system of calculating the hours. Most people don't waste your time. Don't sit idly on Shabbat, but you don't have to calculate how many hours it's been of Torah study. In any case, the reading of the Torah is a unique type of Torah study because it's from the parchment. It's from the Torah scroll, which we keep in the Beit Knesset. Go back, page 80. So who's going to read? Gershon, you're reading so beautifully. So section 6, it's chapter 5, section 6. Go ahead.
Do you want me to do the note as well?
No.
So in that case, reading the Torah on Shabbat, an ordinance tracing back to Moshe mandates that Jews read from the Holy Torah scrolls written in ink on parchment every Shabbat, Monday and Thursday. This is from Bava Kama 82a. Due to the holiness and exaltedness of Shabbat, the sages instituted that 7 people should be called up to read from it, corresponding to the 7 days of the week. This is sourced in Megillah 21a and Talmud Bavli. In Talmudic times, it took communities in Eretz Yisrael 3 years to cycle through the entire Torah. Rabbi Bar Chaim, by the way, talks about this and wanted to try to reinstitute it in his community. I had a few friends and then they talk about doing something.
Do you know who else does that?
Who else?
The Reform movement. So I wouldn't say he's in good company there,
Say it.
with all due respect. Go ahead.
Okay. While in Babylonia, it was completed annually. The current custom throughout the Jewish world is to complete the Torah each year on Simchat Torah. This is done by reading the weekly parasha on Shabbat. Each of the 7 people called up to the Torah reads part of the parasha, referred to as an aliyah. Together, they complete the entire parasha. If one Shabbat, a congregation is unable to read the parasha, the next week it must be read with 2 parshiot to make up for the one that's missed.
During Corona, there were some communities that actually did that. At the beginning of Corona, they didn't allow the shuls to meet. People couldn't read from the Torah, so the next week they read 2 parshas. This actually happened in our lifetime.
Is it extensible? If you miss 3, you do 3?
Yes. The idea is we're trying to get to Simchat Torah. We'll finish the entire cycle. We have a set system of each week which parsha to read. So if you miss it, if you just miss it personally, most rabbis say it's a communal obligation. So if the community read the Torah parsha and you were sick that day, all right, you missed that parsha, but the community continues to read. Some the Briskers, the rabbis of the Soloveitchik lineage, they were very machmir. They understood that reading the Torah is a personal obligation as well. And since they were big rabbis and they could do whatever they wanted, and the community would listen to them, so when one of them traveled and missed out the parsha because he was traveling and he wasn't in a community on Shabbat where he had a Torah reading, the next week, even though everybody else had heard the entire parsha from last week, the Kohen, the first Aliyah, he asked them, and they repeated. They did the entire last week's parsha so that just one person could hear it, so the rabbi could hear and fulfill what he understood was a personal obligation to hear from the Torah, the entire Torah. Most rabbis don't have that chumrah. Anyways, next, the Haftorah. Turn to page 82, please. We're going to skip ahead. We're not going to get into all the details of how exactly the Torah is read. It's for another time. We want to just say the basic points here. What is the Haftorah? Section 7. Go ahead, Gershon.
The sages instituted that in addition to the Torah reading, there should also be a public reading from the prophets of the Rabbi on a topic related to either the Torah reading or to the time of year. 1 beracha is made before this reading and 4 afterward. This reading is called the Haftarah, meaning conclusion, for with it the Torah reading concludes. The Haftarah was instituted following an imperial decree that Jews may not read from the Torah on penalty of death. However, since the decree did not apply to reading from the prophets, the sages of that time instituted that congregations read from the prophets instead of the Torah. They further instituted that the reading from the prophets be modeled on Torah reading, with berachot before and after, and it was 7 aliyot. After the decree was rescinded and the Torah reading resumed, the sages ordained that congregations continue to read from the prophets each week. But now special berachot were established for that purpose. Since while the decree was in place, they had 7 people reading from the prophets, each reading was a minimum of 3 verses. They instituted that the maftir, the person who reads the Haftarah, should read a minimum of 21 verses. However, if the selected passage from the prophets is shorter than 21 verses, we conclude the reading when the subject is finished, even if it is fewer than 21 verses. This is sourced from Shulchan Aruch 284.1 and Mishnah Berurah, location to...
Adlock, on the spot. Adlock, it's on the spot, yeah.
In order to demonstrate that the Haftarah is not as important as the Torah reading, it was ordained that the maftir should read a few verses from the Torah scroll first, and only then from the prophets. Strictly speaking, the 7th Oleh may read the Haftarah, but the custom is to follow the opinion that the maftir should not be one of the 7 Olim. Therefore, after 7 Olim finishing the parsha, the Kaf Kaddish, it's recited, thus concluding Torah reading. Then the maftir is called up to read a few verses from the Torah scroll, and then he goes on to read the Haftarah from the prophets. Some maintain that just as the Torah is read from the parchment scroll, so too the Haftarah must be read from the parchment scroll. This is the Revush's opinion. However, many Achronim maintain that the Haftarah may be read from a printed volume. It's better to read it from a volume that has the entire text than the biblical book from which the Haftarah is taken from. But if this is not available, one may read from a book that only has the verses of the Haftarah, as is the case with many of our printed Chumashim.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
And
Earlier, Rabbi, Mishnah Berurah. Okay, so how many aliyot are there during weekdays? This morning?
3.
3, right? And how many aliyot are there on Rosh Chodesh?
5.
Nope.
4.
Rosh Chodesh, 4. And how many aliyot are there on Yamim Tovim? Holidays.
That's 5.
5.
Unless it falls on Shabbat, then it becomes 7.
And how many are there on Shabbat? Oh, wait, before that, how many are there on Yom Kippur?
6.
Yom Kippur is 6, and on Shabbat 7. Okay? Now, how many aliyot there are? Well, actually, what we do in practice, we have 7 aliyot. We divide up the parsha into 7 readers, but then we add 1. The 1 is called the maftir, the person who's going to say the haftarah. Okay, so we have maftir and haftarah. Seven plus 8. Usually it's the same person who, the maftir, that's what it means. The person who's going to say the haftarah, is going to say the concluding part. This comes from the prophets, right? From the prophets. It's not quite a Torah. The maftir is usually a repeat of the seventh portion, or a small part of the 7th portion. The last few psukim of the parsha gets repeated for the maftir. Sometimes, if it's a special day, if there's something special going on, then we take out another Sefer Torah, and the maftir reads about the special holiday. The maftir is a separate reading, not part of the 7 of the regular reading, but a totally separate reading. And then he says the haftarah, which is related to, from the prophets, related to the topic at hand. Okay, so we have 7 plus 1 plus the haftarah. Is that clear? The maftir usually is the same guy who says the haftarah. Sometimes the person who gets the aliyah, usually all he has to know how to say is the blessings before and the blessings after. And there's a reader. But the guy who gets the maftir, he has to know not only how to say the blessings, but he has to know how to read the haftarah too. And there's a special tune with the cantillation marks. Even if you don't have a scroll, you still have to know how to sing nicely and how to read Hebrew for all of the haftarah. So usually we give the maftir to this aliyah, we give it to somebody who knows how to read well, the prophet. Sometimes you give it to someone and he says, sorry, I can say the blessings before and after the reading from the Torah, but I can't do the haftarah. So they said to him, okay, you do the blessings before and after the haftarah, right? There's 1 blessing before, 4 blessings after the haftarah, special blessing. And somebody else will have a reader, just like for the Torah. We'll have a reader for the Torah, we'll have a reading for the haftarah. Somebody who knows how to read the prophets. And that's but he has to break his teeth over the blessings. Those 4 special blessings and the 1 special blessing beforehand. That's the maftir and the haftarah. Sometimes we have a special reader for the haftarah, even though ideally it's the person who can. That whole idea of having this extra, what's this idea of having an extra Torah reading? 7 plus 1. Why should we read from the Torah and an additional 1? It's because we're going to call somebody to read from the prophets. Now to call somebody to read from the prophets, after everybody else was called to read from the Torah, it would seem like maybe that guy thinks that the prophets are more important than the Torah. Because he's reading only from the prophets and not from the Torah. And so they said, no, we'll have the same guy that we're calling to read from the prophets, we'll make sure that he also reads from the Torah. So that it won't look bad. It won't look like, oh, he only believes in the prophets and not in the Torah. Something like that. And so the whole idea of having such a maftir is that he's the guy that reads the Haftarah. And so he also reads a little bit from the Torah. That's why, ideally, he's the one who should be saying the Haftarah, the guy who gets the maftir. To separate the two, sort of, you're missing out the whole point of having a maftir. Why have the extra +1 here, maftir, if he's not going to be the guy who's reading from the Haftarah? So that's why they go together, really. But in any case, this is the custom. As I said, on holidays we have the maftir reading from sometimes a different topic. For example, on Shabbat, that's also Rosh Chodesh. So it's not a holiday. So we read the regular weekday parsha, Lech Lecha this week. It's not Rosh Chodesh. But let's say whatever the parsha is, and then we finish the 7. We finish the portion of the week, but we have to have a special reading for Rosh Chodesh. So we bring out a second Sefer Torah, open it up to Parshat Pinchas and Sefer Bamidbar, and we read the maftir. He reads from the Rosh Chodesh reading about the sacrifices on Rosh Chodesh, and then the Haftarah always has to do with the last reading that was read. And so the Haftarah is about Rosh Chodesh too. So the maftir and the Haftarah pretty much indicate Boker Tov. Come on in, it's okay. The maftir and the Haftarah indicate that it's Rosh Chodesh, and the weekly parsha is for the first 7 readings. The Seder, so that's hopefully you got that.
Maftir is also for Rosh Chodesh?
If it's Rosh Chodesh, then we use the extra +1 to stick in the Rosh Chodesh reading. From the Torah, right. So we do both. We have the regular weekly parsha for 7 aliyot, and then the Rosh Chodesh reading in the one aliyah of maftir. Is that clear?
Why is it there's a difference between the Ashkenazi and the Sephardi for the Haftarah proportion?
There's not always a difference.
Yeah.
There are some differences. Because it doesn't really, there's no list in the Talmud exactly which reading from the prophets we should read, and so different customs developed in different communities, but they're all kosher. Ideally 21 verses, as we saw. We'll have to stop here. Rabbi Yehuda Cohen's going to give you a shir now.